Hi, we're going to be keeping going with our studies in the book of Numbers. So we've only done 2 so far, where this is going to be the 3rd in our series in Numbers, and it's going to be about Numbers 8, where we see a group of people taken from the rest of the Israelites and set apart for service to God. So we're going to look at why they were chosen, what their job was, and then we'll have to think, what on earth has it got to do with us? One of the things, whenever I read this passage, getting ready for it, one of the things that stood out was how different, not just this section in Numbers, but other parts leading up to this event are different from our culture today. In our culture today, we are getting bombarded every single day by the media about who we are and what we can be and our value and about what our lives are for. And we're told that we can be anything. We're told that we can fulfill anything. We're told not to limit anyone's potential, especially not our own. We're told to stay true to ourselves, that we can fulfill our dreams. And we're told that anyone can be anything that they choose. And if you've been watching any of the news or keeping up with things, you'll see that this is leading to confusion. We have people changing race. We have people changing genders. We have people jumping and changing, all seeking this definition, seeking fulfillment, seeking happiness. And every day we are being shaped by this message that we can be whoever we want to be. In that goal of happiness, we will push boundaries of what's already in place to try and discover what that is. If you're older, it maybe doesn't influence you so much. You see it, you hear about it, you're aware of it, but it doesn't bother you. You're quite set in what you know is right and wrong, what those boundaries are. If you're younger, or if you have young people in your house, every day this is being attacked, this is being eroded. And whenever a young person will read this passage and hear what we're going to talk about tonight, it's going to be completely different than what they're hearing every single day. When they open their phone, celebrities, this message is totally against what they're hearing in the world. So we need to be aware of it. We need to get ready to counter it. We need to get ready to defend it. And then we need to live out this truth. So, what is happening tonight in Numbers? It's from chapter 8. And we're going to see a group of people set apart for service to God. So let's read some of those verses. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the Levites from among all the Israelites and make them ceremonial clean. To purify them, do this. Sprinkle the water of cleansing on them, then make them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes. And so they will purify themselves. Make them take a young bull with its grain offering of the finest flour mixed with olive oil. Then you are to take a second young bull for a sin offering. Bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting, assemble the whole Israelite community. You are to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the Israelites, so that they may be ready to do the work of the Lord." So right away, there's all sorts of things need explained, all sorts of questions come up. And if you're reading that and you've been shaped by today's cultures, there's things that are going to jump out straight away that are going to sound wrong, best case scenario different, but probably wrong. You're going to see a group taken, set apart from the rest, chosen to serve God, and it's a group of males. Now, right away, that stands out. What? Males set apart is different from females? What's going on there? That doesn't sound right. Then we have bulls being taken as sacrifice. And again, the push, the animals are of as much worth as humans. That's going to be pushed. This group is going to be taken and set for defined service for God in the tabernacle. So they're not free to choose whatever career path they want to reach their potential as a farmer or a fisherman. This group of males is chosen for a certain time for a specific career in order to serve God. Now that flies right in the face of everything that we are told today. That we can be who we want to be. We're free to explore, pursue our happiness. If you're not happy, change it. You can be anything. And right here we see a specific group singled out for a certain task, for a period of time. That's their life. And that is the life that the Lord has called them to. We're going to see, why is that fair? It comes out straight away. How on earth is that fair? That doesn't sound right. Is that the way God would want it to be? I thought God wanted me to be happy, to be who I want to be, to chase my dreams and reach my potential. But this group of Levites, that sounds completely different. So what on earth is going on, and why is it this way? So what is God doing? How can you actually say, take that group and set them apart for me? And all of this goes back to the Passover. So God's people, he has spoken to a couple who were barren, childless, they couldn't have kids. He gave them a promise that one day, out of this childless couple, he was going to create a nation so vast that it couldn't be numbered. It sounded impossible, and then God started to act and do the impossible. Abraham and Sarah, they had children, but most specifically Isaac, the child of promise. And from Isaac came a whole nation, a whole generation. They ended up in slavery in Egypt. Again, the plan seemed to be hampered. What's going to happen now? Now they're slaves. But after 430 years, God began to fulfill his promise, began to work again, and the people began to, all sorts of miracles took place, and through miracles he delivered them out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of bondage, a whole nation of people. And through all sorts of miracles he delivered them, the last of which was the Passover. And this occasion here in Numbers 8 is directly linked to the Passover. So what happened in the Passover that meant that God could say, take that group of people and they're to be mine for my service in the temple? What made it right for God to say, I'm having that group of people to serve me? They belong to me. Surely that doesn't sound like the compassionate God that we talk about and we believe in. And this is the reason. Let's have a think about this. Going back to Passover, and this is from the book of Numbers. The Lord said to Moses, Numbers 3, verse 11. The Lord said to Moses, I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. The Levites are mine, for all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set apart for myself every firstborn in Israel, whether human or animal. They are to be mine. I am the Lord. So this is again directly in the book of Numbers, going back to Passover, what he did in that final act of deliverance to rescue a nation from slavery and bondage. In that act, something happened where now the firstborn in Israel, whether male or animal, belonged to God. So in that act of redemption, what God did was he had them give them a warning that if they wanted to be safe from this judgment, this plague, they had to take a lamb, a young lamb without defect or anything wrong with it. They had to take the blood, again animal sacrifice, sprinkle it on their door frames, and when God passed over the nation in judgment, if he saw the blood, if he saw that something was sacrificed, that something died, he passed over that house in judgment. So of course the Israelites, they listened, they did it, they carried out the sacrifice, they applied the blood, God passed over. When he came to the Egyptian homes, the warning was given, they didn't do the blood, they hadn't carried out a sacrifice, there was no death as a substitute for that firstborn, and so God passed over in judgment. And the firstborn male in each of the houses of Egypt died, from the slaves to Pharaoh. God killed in judgment all of the firstborn males in Egypt. All the firstborn males in Israel were saved because of the death of the Passover lamb. It took an animal to die to save those firstborn sons. And because of that, God said, those firstborn sons belong to me. I saved them. I redeemed them. They are mine. The firstborn in Israel belongs to me. So because God did that, they belong to him. So this is the generation now that has come out. Those firstborn, because God actually saved them, redeemed them through that lamb sacrifice, they belong to him. Now, what do they do then whenever it gets to census and there's a whole group? What does it look like to belong to God? What does it mean for them? So God decided what we're going to do, instead of all of those firstborn males coming into my service, what we'll do is I'll take a particular group and I'm going to make them mine. They're going to be my special people. And that group was the Levites. So again, why the Levites? Why pick that family over another family? And if you were part of the Levites, Would that be unfair? Would it be unfair? You'd be looking over at the other clans and thinking, oh no, he gets to be a fisherman, or fisher people. He gets to be a fisherman. That's not fair. Why am I getting drafted into service? So again, we go back into Exodus and we find out why the Levites were chosen from among all the clans. So after Sinai, Moses was up getting the law, getting the covenant, the promise, this agreement between God and his people, that they would be his people and he would be their God. And an agreement that they all signed up to. While he was there, the people down below got impatient, demanded that they have an idol, demanded that they have something physical that they can worship and say, this is our God that delivered us from Egypt. I think, how could they act so rebellious? It had only been a short time and they'd already forgotten what God had done. They wanted to put something else in the place of God and call that their God and say that that thing worshipped them, or sorry, saved them. So that's the golden calf. That was rebellion. And when Moses came down, he was outraged and he called for anybody that was going to stand with him and agree with God and say, who's going to stand, who's with me, who is for God, and take out some punishment. The Levites ran to Moses. They sided with him and they took out punishment on their brothers and family members and in the clan of Israel. People died, people were punished. The Levites that day chose who they were going to serve. They chose to serve the Lord. They chose to defend his name, defend his honor, and to do things that would glorify him. They chose to say there's a difference between right and wrong. There's a difference between true worship and false worship. From that day, the Levites were selected as a special group from among all Israel because of that position. True worship versus false worship. Real service, false service. True God, false God. The Levites made that call. So God said, they're going to be my special people. They're going to be the ones that are going to serve. But there's an issue, because all of the firstborn males were saved. All of them belonged to God. So how would he get the special group, that group in Numbers 8 that we saw dedicated to him? What happened was, he said, after the census where he counted everybody, he then said, now you're going to count all of the firstborn males in in Israel, from basically 1 month old up. So only the firstborn males. So he counted all the Levite firstborn males. Moses counted them from 1 month old and up, and there was 22,000. Then he said, count all the rest. So he counted the rest of the clans. There's 22,273. There was an outstanding balance of 273. Now you think, oh, what does it matter? It's 22,000. It matters, because God was trying to teach them a lesson, as he had been in Exodus, as he had been in Leviticus. Whenever he gave them the tabernacle and his presence came down, he then took the whole of Leviticus to tell them, you can't just wander into my presence. There are ways and there are things you need to learn. There's a difference between clean and unclean, between right and wrong, holy and unholy, and these very, very specific laws and ceremonies and offerings to try and teach the people. It matters how we approach God. It matters that he is holy and we are unholy. It matters how we get there, and all of it is particular and in detail, designed to teach people we must to get near God, we have to deal with sin. You cannot come to God unclean. That's what Leviticus is teaching, how to draw near to God. Then we have this group, and there's 273 more outside of the Levites than there are of the Levites. What do we do? He's teaching it matters. Redemption matters. It matters who belongs to God. So he said, there's 273 outstanding that belong to me. These 22,000 Levites, the firstborn males, they cancel out the 22,000 from the other clans. This 273 is outstanding. You need to redeem them. You need to basically pay something or give a cost or give a price to buy them back, because they're the Lord's. If you want those 273, you need to buy them. He's teaching them that it matters, redemption matters, belonging to God matters. So they had to pay a price. For every firstborn male of that 273, they had to pay to set them free. Now, it was the money that was given to them in Egypt. It was given to Aaron and his sons and used for the tabernacle worship and the whole system set up. But they had to be redeemed. And each of those families that gave that money, it would have cost them something, and they would have remembered what that meant. When they give the money for their firstborn son, whether he was 1 month old or 20, It would have cost them something to give that money, to redeem that child, to keep that child as theirs, to say, that's for the Lord, I've bought my son back. They would have remembered redemption. They would have remembered what God did in Passover. They would have remembered the death of a lamb saved their son, and they owed God. They were indebted to God. And that sacrifice of money cost them. So we live somewhere where that same thing kind of applied. People still redeem some things. They redeem property, animals. Everything had a value attached to it. And there were certain, even acts could be redeemed. They had to be paid for. There was a value. So one example is there was one of the guys in the wee village. He shot his brother-in-law and killed him. So a bit awkward. They just live over the road. So you imagine doing that. That would be a pretty awkward situation. But he shot his brother-in-law anyway and killed him. And the agreement between the families were, well, it was his sister's husband. So what he said was, or what the sister said was basically, look, we'll take your motorbike and you can build us a new house, which is, a stilted house with grass walls. Build us a new house, the motorbike, and basically any other favours going forward in the future, and we'll call it quits. So what was the value of the life of that brother-in-law? Okay, he committed murder, essentially. The value was a motorbike and a new house. That paid for that life. Redeemed what he had done. He paid for what he had done. Another example is a guy was moving and needed a bit of cash, so he sold his little property and some of the animals, moved away, it didn't work out, came back. Now, it's his house, it's his animals, but he had sold them, so he had to then buy them back from the person that had bought them from him. He had to redeem them and take back what was his. And the Lord is trying to teach the same thing to the Levites and all of Israel. They belong to me. If you want them, you have to buy them back. It matters that they belong to God. Redemption matters. And we should start using these words more. We should start teaching these words more. Because what we find sometimes is a group of people who claim to be Christians, but they're entitled. And they think they're entitled to do whatever they want, however they want, and basically buying into that message that we mentioned at the beginning, where the media is telling us you're free to be whoever you want to be, to do whatever you want to do. And yet when we read scripture, we see, no, if I'm redeemed by God, I belong to him. My life is his. And I'm not told to reach my potential, I'm told to deny myself. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will save it. It's upside down. It's totally different than what the culture is telling us every single day. Redemption matters. These Levites were going to be God's special people, set apart, and over and over it says, they are mine, they are mine, they are mine, the Levites are mine. God bought them. They belong to him, like all the other firstborn. And as a lesson going forward, all of the firstborns had to be bought, whether it was money or whether it was an animal. There had to be something to teach the people about Passover, to teach them and cast their mind back. You were delivered from slavery because of the death of that lamb. And now they owe God the life of their firstborn meal. They're set apart. Now they're being dedicated. This group of Levites, who are going to be different than the rest of Israel, they're going to be set apart and dedicated to him. It matters as well how they get ready for service. And if you remember what we read, they're getting ceremonial clean. Now, it doesn't mean that they were all justified in God's sight, because we know right away Aaron's sons back in Leviticus, they were struck dead because they didn't get this. They thought, well, they had a bit of that entitlement going on. We're Aaron's sons, the high priest's sons. We can do whatever. I want to offer some different act of worship. I think I'll do that. They went into the Holy of Holies and got struck dead. Being redeemed does not mean you're free to do whatever you want. It matters how we approach God. So the Levites had to be ceremonial clean. Now everyone's watching this. It was designed to teach, just like lots of those laws in Leviticus. It's designed to teach people clean and unclean. And God here is teaching them, if there's going to be people dedicated to me, they must be clean. So this act of washing, it wasn't so much washing away sins or making them justified. It was just showing everybody, They are now clean and dedicated for worship. It matters that you're clean before we start worshipping. They had to dedicate themselves, and what they had a sin offering, which of course we know that sin had to be dealt with. And it takes humility to bring a sin offering and to say, I've sinned, I need to bring this because I've done wrong, I've offended God. So a sin offering was an act of confession. It was an act showing that you need to be made right with God. Reconciliation was what you wanted and what you needed. So this whole group had to have a sin offering in order to come into God's presence, to be made right with God. They also had the burnt offering, which was a dedication. A burnt offering, the whole thing was consumed, saying the whole thing is for God. So the sin offering, they had the burnt offering, sin offering, reconciliation, burnt offering, dedication. They were cleansed, ready for service. And then the last part of the ceremony was they were offered as a wave offering. So the wave offering, it comes up in Exodus and Leviticus. And essentially it is what it sounds like. Things were waved to the Lord, literally sort of saying, Lord, this is yours. The same way, where's the such and such that belongs to me? It's over here. You're waving it to show this belongs to you. That's what they were going to do with the Levites. Everybody gathered round, they laid their hands on them, and now they didn't pick them up and wave them, but they were sort of saying, look, Lord, this group belonged to you. This group is the redeemed group. They are set apart for your service. Here they are, Lord. Look at them. They're clean. The sin offering, the burnt offering, they're now dedicated to you. They're your people to do with what you want for your service and worship in the tabernacle. That was the setup. That was the day. And if you can imagine all of that taking place, it would be quite a thing to watch. Like they're all going to look a bit strange. They were shaved. The whole bodies were shaved. They were washed. Everybody around putting their hands on this group of people, 22,000. This was quite a ceremony. You wouldn't forget it if you had seen it. It should have made a huge impact on the people, and that's what lots of this was designed to do, to teach people what it means to be redeemed, what it means to come near to God, what it means to approach Him, what it means to serve Him, what it means to worship Him. And they started off well. It all was set up. There was offerings, the people were into it. It was all going really well. And then very quickly after this, things descended. You had rebellion from within the Levites. Death followed. People descended into all sorts of sin and issues. And as we get on through the Old Testament, we realize, it came to a certain point in the temple worship where God actually said in the book of Malachi, He told Malachi, tell them to close the doors of the temple, put out the fires. I don't want their acts of service. I don't want their false worship. They were still committing all of these things. They were doing the ritual, but it was empty. They were often disabled animals, lame animals. They were cheating, they were lying, and they still thought that they could cheat God and deceive God. And God had taught them here at the very beginning what it means to approach Him. How do you approach Him? You can't cheat Him. And in fact, they belonged to Him, and they had twisted it and distorted it. So, what does a passage like that mean for us? Well, they were set free from slavery in Egypt through the death of that Passover lamb. They were redeemed, belonging to God for His service. Now, it doesn't take a genius, if you're familiar at all with the Bible, to figure out where we're going now. We are redeemed by the death of the Passover lamb, Jesus Christ Himself, without sin or blemish or imperfection. He took our place. God passed over us in judgment. He died for our place, in our place. We are set free from the slavery and the bondage of sin, fear of death, the devil, power of darkness, judgment. We are set free. Now, we're not set free to do whatever we want. Read the New Testament, pick up on all the commands that are given to those who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, redeemed. There are commands, there are specific commands. There are things that we have to do. There are things that we ought to do, things that we must do. And Jesus said, if you don't do this, you're not my disciples. So don't get it out of our heads, this message that the culture says you're free to do whatever you want, to reach your potential and live your dreams. If you are redeemed through Jesus Christ, the Passover lamb, you belong to God. You are His. And He wants you for service. You have been cleansed. And now He calls you to dedicate your life. Read Romans 12, 1 and 2. Offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. And he says that is the true and proper worship. See, it's so easy to get confused with all of this and to go to worship events and the lights are dim, the music's good, people are praying with music in the background, reading with music in the background. It's emotional, it's great. It's so easy to close eyes, stick up a hand and think worship is amazing. The true act of worship is saying to God, thank you, offering yourself as a living sacrifice, almost like a wave offering, and saying to God, here I am, use me, send me, I belong to you. That is true happiness. That is true fulfillment. It's not the twisted distortion that's going on these days. The false promise, be who you are, explore your limits and all of that. You'll find happiness, you won't. True joy, peace and happiness will only be found when we realize that we belong to God. We are part of His family, His children, and we are here for Him to live as living sacrifices. And it is true in experience as well. This isn't just theoretical. The moments where I have felt, and it's not just all in your head, you feel these things too, that I have felt most at peace have been in times where you're actually serving God. Some of the hardest, most sort of difficult times have been times where you're doing your own thing, going your own way, doing whatever you want. And sometimes it's so difficult. I'm still doing those acts of worship, those acts of service, but my heart's not in it. Just like the people in Malachi. I'm showing up to things and helping out with bits and pieces and serving and writing things. But to be honest, sometimes I'd rather be out doing something else. You hear about other people and think, they get to go and go surfing. I have to sit and study this because I have to talk to people. It's full, it's distorted. It's not the way it's meant to be. It should be a joyous thing. It should be something that we want to do. Why? It's an act of gratitude, saying thank you to Jesus Christ for redeeming us, for buying us out of the slavery. And that's why it's so important. Every year, the children of Israel had to remember Passover. They should never have forgotten what happened that day when they were set free from slavery. They had to remember the cost of that Passover lamb. And that's why Jesus told his disciples and all of us in the church to keep on remembering him and what he had done. Part of the new covenant and all those blessings, to never forget it. Because when we do, we'll become selfish. We'll become entitled. And we'll become deceived with the world's message that our life is about us, reaching our potential, making the career that we want to have for ourselves, chasing happiness, chasing relationships, and we'll become deceived. That's not what this is. So listen to a couple of verses and let these speak to you, and go away, have a think about them, pray about them, and just think about what this means and be honest with where exactly that we're all at. Are we truly appreciative of the Passover lamb, of redemption? Do you think that you belong to God, or do you think your life is your own? So listen to these verses. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. You are God's special possession. Now that's not designed to make you warm and fuzzy. It's meant to make you remember you belong to him. What for? For service. To offer acts of praise to him. That's what you're for. That's why you belong to him. Another one. This is 1 Corinthians 6:19. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? And this is it. You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. If you belong to Jesus Christ, it matters what we do with our bodies. He calls us to give our bodies as a living sacrifice. Your body, my body, they're not our own if we've been truly redeemed. We belong to God. And it's not in a slavish submission where now it's all the fun's ruined, we can't do whatever we want. This is life to the full. This is eternal life. You are not your own. You were bought at a great price, the price of the sacrifice of the Son of God. And if that doesn't matter to you, I would say that you truly haven't understood yet what your sin is, the offense that is to God, and the ultimate sacrifice that Jesus Christ paid. Stop and have a think. When you think about your life, do you think about what you want for your life? What would make you happy? The goals that you want to chase, the career you want to have? Or have you ever stopped and said, offered yourself like a wave offering and said, Lord, take me, use me. Here's what I think. I would like to do this. What do you want from me? My life is yours. I belong to you. Now the culture would say, that's wrong, that's slavish, you're not truly free. But listen, this is the culture that says that a person can actually be an animal. A person can change genders. A person can change race. Are we going to listen to the true God, the Creator, order, wisdom, or are we going to listen to a culture that changes its mind every 5 minutes? You're not your own, you're bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God with your bodies.